There are moments in life when emotions that have been buried for too long begin to rise again, not in a loud or dramatic way, but in a quiet internal shift that feels impossible to ignore. What is being described here is one of those emotional turning points where reflection becomes unavoidable and people are forced to look at their own actions, choices, and the impact they have had on someone they once held close. It is not about punishment or blame, but about realization slowly taking shape inside the mind, where memories, regret, and understanding begin to overlap in a way that is difficult to escape. In this situation, it is suggested that a person has reached a stage of deep reflection about a past connection that still holds emotional weight. They are not simply remembering events, they are revisiting moments with a clearer awareness of what those moments meant. When someone begins to recognize the value of a bond only after distance has formed, their thoughts often become heavier because hindsight brings clarity that was not present in the moment. This kind of realization does not arrive all at once. It builds gradually, through silence, memory, and the emotional consequences of separation. There is also an emotional struggle taking place internally. On one side, there is pride, hesitation, and the fear of confronting difficult truths. On the other side, there is the growing awareness that avoidance no longer brings peace. When someone has avoided emotional responsibility for a long time, eventually even silence becomes uncomfortable. Thoughts that were once pushed aside begin to return repeatedly, especially during quiet moments. These thoughts often revolve around what was said, what was left unsaid, and how different things might have been if choices had been made differently. In such emotional states, people often begin to revisit their past actions in detail. Conversations replay in the mind, not as they happened in real time, but as they are reinterpreted through a more aware and reflective perspective. Words that once felt casual may now feel significant. Moments that were once dismissed may now feel meaningful. This shift in perception can create a strong emotional response because it forces a person to confront the gap between intention and impact. When someone realizes that their actions may have caused emotional distance or hurt, it often leads to a form of internal discomfort that cannot easily be ignored. At the same time, distance can intensify reflection. When communication fades, the mind tends to fill that silence with thought. In the absence of direct interaction, memories become more vivid, and emotions become more amplified. A person may begin to notice how often their thoughts return to the same individual, even without intention. This repeated mental return is not always about wanting to relive the past, but about trying to understand it. Why did things unfold the way they did? What could have been done differently? What was not fully understood at the time? These questions often appear when emotional clarity begins to replace emotional avoidance. Another important part of this process is the realization of emotional impact. People sometimes underestimate how deeply their actions affect others until they are no longer able to see the immediate response in front of them. When distance creates space, it also creates perspective. That perspective can lead to understanding the weight of words spoken in the past, the effect of silence, and the consequences of emotional inconsistency. This understanding does not necessarily erase the past, but it changes how it is viewed internally. It shifts from something that was once taken lightly to something that now carries emotional significance. Alongside regret, there is often a growing awareness of what was lost. This is not always about losing a person in a physical sense, but about losing a connection, a sense of emotional closeness, or a form of trust that once existed. When people reflect on meaningful relationships, they often realize that what they miss most is not just the person, but the emotional stability and understanding that came with that bond. Recognizing this loss can be painful, especially when it becomes clear that it was influenced by personal actions or choices. However, reflection is not only about regret, it also brings clarity. In many cases, people begin to understand their own emotional patterns, fears, and limitations more honestly. They may recognize that avoidance was driven by insecurity, that silence was shaped by uncertainty, or that mistakes were made not out of lack of care, but out of lack of emotional readiness. This does not excuse past behavior, but it provides a fuller understanding of why things happened the way they did. Self-awareness often grows in these moments, even if it comes through discomfort. There is also a shift that occurs when someone starts to consider accountability. Instead of only thinking about what was lost, they begin to think about what can still be acknowledged or addressed. This may involve the desire to take responsibility, not necessarily to change the past, but to bring honesty into the present. Accountability in emotional situations is not always about grand gestures. Sometimes it begins with simply accepting one's own role in what unfolded, without denial or justification. That acceptance can be difficult, but it is often the first step toward emotional maturity. At the same time, uncertainty remains. Even when realization occurs, it does not automatically lead to resolution. People may still struggle with how to express what they feel, whether it is too late, or how their honesty might be received. These uncertainties create hesitation, which can delay action even when emotional clarity is present. This internal pause is common in situations where emotions are strong but confidence in communication is low. It becomes a space where intention and fear exist side by side. On the other side of this emotional experience, the person who has been distanced may also be in a state of quiet strength. Silence in such contexts is not necessarily emptiness. It can also represent self-protection, healing, and emotional recovery. When someone steps back after emotional strain, they often begin rebuilding their sense of stability. They reflect on what they learned, what they endured, and what they no longer wish to repeat. This form of emotional growth is often unseen, but deeply significant. What makes these situations complex is that both individuals may be experiencing transformation at the same time, but in different ways. One may be moving through regret and realization, while the other is moving through healing and rediscovery. These emotional paths do not always align in timing, which is why resolution is not immediate. Understanding, if it comes, usually arrives gradually, through reflection and time rather than sudden change. Ultimately, what is unfolding here is not just a story of emotional regret or distance, but a broader human experience of learning through connection, loss, and reflection. People often do not fully understand the value of emotional bonds until they are placed in a position where they can no longer take them for granted. In that space of absence, awareness begins to grow. Whether that awareness leads to reconciliation, closure, or simply personal growth depends on many factors, but what remains constant is the transformation that occurs within. In the end, emotional experiences like this remind us that understanding often comes after silence, and clarity often comes after distance. People change not only through what they experience together, but also through what they learn when apart. And sometimes, the most meaningful shift is not in the relationship itself, but in the individuals who emerge from it with a deeper awareness of themselves and what connection truly means. Repeatedly, broke promises without thinking, took your loyalty for granted, and now, that truth is sitting like a weight on their chest they can't inhale around. The facade is cracking, child. The truth is leaking into the open. And what's even more unexpected is this. Your person is trying to fix something silently before you find out. They're canceling plans you don't know about. They're distancing themselves from someone who contributed to the lies. They're erasing conversations they're ashamed of. They're trying to clean the mess they created, as if clearing their tracks will erase the mistakes. They're terrified you'll learn something they're not ready to confess. Terrified that you'll see how much chaos they allowed around your name. Terrified that if the wrong detail reaches you, everything between you will be beyond repair. And that fear is pushing them toward a decision they never imagined they'd make. So listen closely now, because this is the part where the energy shifts. Your person is preparing a move that could change your entire connection. A move guided not by ego, but by desperation, guilt, and the heavy realization that you were the only stable place in their life. They want to come forward, not with excuses, but with honesty. They want to admit the betrayal they denied. They want to explain the hesitation they hid. They want to tell you what really happened the night they disappointed you the most. And the universe is guiding this moment forward faster than they're ready for. My beloved child, brace yourself, because what I reveal now is the part your person never wanted anyone, especially you, to uncover. Their guilt is reaching a breaking point. The truth they buried under excuses, distractions, and half-hearted apologies is rising to the surface, and it's shaking their entire world. They know they disappointed you. They know they tore holes in your trust more than once. And now they're standing in the middle of consequences they can't escape. Every mistake they made is finding its way back to them, and the universe is making sure they feel the weight of every moment they made you question your worth. But here is the twist. They're realizing something terrifying. Your silence is not anger. It's clarity. It's strength. It's the moment they finally understood that you don't need to shout to make your value known. You don't need to ask for loyalty. You embody it. You don't need to chase anyone. You attract truth without forcing it. And this realization has sent them into a state they never thought they would face. Their confidence shaken. Their ego destroyed. Their excuses useless. Because the one person who could forgive them, heal them, and understand them is now the one person they fear losing more than anything. What they didn't expect is that someone close to them told them the truth to their face. They said, "You broke something sacred, and you don't deserve another chance unless you learn how to cherish what was given to you." Those words landed harder than any argument they've ever had, because deep down, they knew it was real. They knew they let you down in the exact moments you needed them to stand beside you. They knew they played with your trust, because they thought you'd always be there waiting. They didn't believe you'd walk away, not fully. They didn't think the day would come when your absence would hurt more than your heartbreak ever could. But that day has arrived, and now your person is stuck in a terrifying loop, rewinding every moment where they hurt you, replaying every time you forgave them, reliving every time they promised to change and didn't. They're haunted by the image of you finally moving on, finally choosing yourself, finally finding peace without the minute. They're imagining you smiling with someone else, laughing with someone who gives you everything they couldn't, and that thought is tearing them apart in a way they can't show anyone. They're hiding their pain, hiding their fear, hiding the truth that losing you would break something inside them that cannot be repaired. Yet here is where destiny bends. Your person is being pushed toward a choice between their comfort and their courage, a choice between their pride and their truth, a choice between letting you slip away forever or finally stepping into the vulnerability they've run from their entire life. Right now, they're rehearsing what they'll say if you ever give them one more chance. They're practicing the apology they never had the strength to speak. They're holding on to memories of you like a lifeline, hoping you haven't closed the door completely, and the universe is preparing to push them into a moment where hiding will no longer be possible. Stay close, child, because the next thing they're about to do will reveal everything they tried to conceal, every guilt, every truth, every broken promise, every regret. The moment of confrontation is closer than they think, and closer than you expect. My beloved child, what I'm about to tell you is the moment your person has been terrified of, the moment where every truth they hid, every mistake they tried to bury, every promise they broke, begins crashing down around them. They know they disappointed you more than once. They know they destroyed the trust you gave so freely. And now they're realizing that life isn't giving them the luxury to hide anymore. Something has shifted in the energy around them, something they can't fight, something that keeps pushing your memory into every corner of their day. They can't escape it. They can't numb it. They can't silence it. The universe is demanding their accountability, and it's coming faster than they can prepare for. Behind the scenes, your person is in a battle with themselves, a battle between confession and fear. Last night, they almost told someone the full truth about how deeply they regret hurting you. The words sat on their tongue, trembling, ready to spill, but when the moment came, they froze. Their pride tried to protect them, but their heart betrayed them. Because every time your name comes up, their voice cracks just a little. Their eyes shift away. Their breathing changes. It's as if the universe is exposing their guilt through every micro-reaction. They're scared that if they speak the truth out loud, the weight of what they did will finally become undeniable. But destiny is cornering them, child, forcing them to face what they've avoided for far too long. And something else is happening, something that's breaking them more than you realize. People around them are starting to see through the facade. Someone confronted them, not with assumptions, but with facts, real facts, about how they treated you. They asked, "Why did you push away the only person who genuinely cared for you?" And your person couldn't answer. Because how can they? How can they explain why they hurt the one heart that held them gently? How can they justify the lies, the secrecy, the distance, the inconsistency? They can't. And that helplessness is eating them alive. Their reputation is cracking. Their confidence is fading. Their relationships with others are shifting because your absence has exposed the emptiness they tried so hard to hide. Now here comes the part destiny wants you to hear. Your person is being pushed toward a major decision, one they can't avoid. A moment is coming where they will have to tell the truth. Not half-truths, not filtered versions, not excuses, the actual truth. Something happened recently, something they thought they could hide, something they hoped would never reach your ears. But the universe has its own timing, and that timing is closing in on them. They're terrified you'll find out before they can explain. They're terrified the truth will destroy whatever small hope they still have left. And yet, at the same time, they know this confrontation is the only way to break the cycle of hurting you and losing you over and over again. And child, what they don't know is that the universe has already started aligning the moment where everything comes out. You'll see a message, you'll hear something unexpectedly, you'll feel a shift in their behavior. The truth they buried will rise, not to punish you, but to free you from the confusion they left you in. And for the first time, they will realize that the forgiveness they took for granted may not be waiting for them this time. They're standing right at the edge of losing the one person they never thought they could lose. My beloved child, listen closely now, because this is the moment where the truth inside your person begins to break them from the inside out. They've spent weeks pretending they're okay, acting like your absence doesn't bother them, doing everything they can to appear strong on the outside, while privately falling apart. But today, something inside them snapped, something they can't hide, can't control, can't silence anymore. They know they disappointed you again and again. They know they damaged your trust in ways you didn't deserve. And now they're facing the consequences, not from the world, but from their own conscience. The guilt they tried to lock away is waking up with a strength they can't fight anymore. Their own heart has become the punishment they thought they could avoid. And today, destiny cornered them in the most unexpected way. A conversation they overheard, a message they weren't supposed to see, a detail they tried to deny. All of it crashed into them like a storm. Someone mentioned your name casually, unaware of the emotional earthquake it would trigger inside them. They tried to act unaffected, but their expression betrayed everything. Their eyes softened, their voice weakened, their hands froze mid-motion, and the person watching them realized the truth your person refused to admit. They're still in love with you, still attached to you, still haunted by you, still holding on to every memory you gave them, as if letting go would destroy the last piece of their sanity. The moment they heard your name, it hit them. Nothing and no one has ever replaced you, and nothing ever will. But here's the part they fear you finding out. They've been trying to fix something they broke behind your back. Quietly, desperately, almost obsessively. They deleted something they said. They apologized to someone they shouldn't have involved. They backed out of a situation they now regret. They tried to clean the chaos they caused, hoping that if destiny gave them one more chance with you, at least they wouldn't bring the same shadows with them. But the more they try to fix things, the more the universe shows them how deeply they messed up. Every door they rely on is closing. Every comfort they used as distraction is slipping. Every person they turn to for advice is telling them the same thing. You hurt the wrong heart. And those words are echoing in their mind like a sentence they can't escape. What they didn't expect, child, is that the universe is aligning a moment they can't control. A confrontation is coming, not one created by argument, but by truth. There is a moment in some lives when silence stops being safe and starts becoming heavy. Not because something new is happening, but because what was already there can no longer stay hidden the same way. In that space, emotions begin to shift in ways people do not always understand immediately. Something that was once buried under hesitation, avoidance, or fear starts to rise, not suddenly, but steadily, like it has always been moving toward the surface and simply ran out of space to stay hidden. What is being described here is not a dramatic event unfolding in a single instant, but an emotional pressure building over time inside a person who has been carrying more than they were ready to express. There has been an effort to hold things back, to control what is felt, to manage consequences before they even arrive. But emotions that are not addressed do not disappear. They settle, they linger, they return in thoughts, in memories, in moments of quiet, when distractions are gone. At some point, that inner weight becomes harder to manage. The mind starts revisiting decisions that were made too quickly or avoided for too long. There is reflection, not always comfortable, but unavoidable. A person begins to understand that what they thought they could keep contained is no longer fully under control. And with that realization comes a growing awareness that honesty is approaching, whether it is welcomed or feared. Fear is often the first response in situations like this. Not necessarily fear of a person, but fear of consequence, fear of being misunderstood, fear of losing something that now feels more important than it did in the beginning. When emotions deepen over time, they tend to change how people view their own actions. What once felt small may now feel significant. What once felt manageable may now feel irreversible. In that internal struggle, a person may begin replaying moments in their mind. Conversations are reevaluated. Words are reconsidered. Decisions are questioned. They may think about how things appeared from the outside, and how differently they now feel about them on the inside. This kind of reflection does not always lead to immediate clarity. Instead, it often creates emotional tension between what was done and what is now understood. Alongside that reflection, there is often a growing awareness of connection, not necessarily perfection, not necessarily certainty, but recognition that what was shared held meaning. Sometimes people only understand the depth of a bond when they imagine its absence. When that thought becomes uncomfortable, it forces emotional honesty. It removes the ability to dismiss feelings as temporary or insignificant. That is where emotional conflict becomes most intense. On one side is the desire to protect oneself from vulnerability. On the other is the realization that avoidance may no longer be sustainable. A person may find themselves stuck between staying silent to avoid risk and speaking up to avoid regret. Neither option feels completely safe, yet both feel increasingly unavoidable. What complicates this even further is responsibility. When someone begins to recognize that their choices may have affected another person emotionally, the weight of that understanding grows. It is no longer just about personal fear or hesitation. It becomes about impact, about awareness, about acknowledging that actions and inactions both leave traces behind. In moments like this, external life often continues as usual, but internally, something is shifting. People may appear normal on the surface, while carrying emotional turbulence underneath. They may go through daily routines, while simultaneously dealing with thoughts that do not leave them alone. This contrast between outer behavior and inner experience can be exhausting, because it creates distance between what is shown and what is felt. As time passes, avoidance becomes harder to maintain. Thoughts that were once pushed aside return more frequently. Emotional reactions become harder to suppress. Even small reminders can trigger reflection. A message, a memory, or even a passing thought can reopen emotions that were temporarily set aside. This is not random. It is the mind trying to resolve what has not been fully addressed. Eventually, a turning point begins to form internally. It is not always dramatic. Sometimes it is quiet, a realization that continuing to avoid truth may create more pain than facing it. This is where internal resistance starts to weaken, not because fear disappears, but because emotional pressure becomes stronger than avoidance. At the same time, there is often heightened sensitivity to distance. When connection matters to someone, even silence can feel significant. Absence can become noticeable in ways it was not before. This does not necessarily mean assumptions are correct or situations are fully understood, but it does mean emotions are actively engaged. The mind begins to assign meaning to gaps, pauses, and unanswered space. What makes this phase emotionally complex is that both clarity and uncertainty exist at the same time. A person may feel sure about what they feel, but unsure about what it means to act on it. They may understand their emotions, yet struggle to translate them into communication. That gap between feeling and expression becomes the central struggle. Eventually, reflection reaches a point where avoidance no longer provides relief. Instead, it creates discomfort. At that stage, honesty begins to feel less like a choice and more like something necessary for emotional balance. Not because everything is perfectly understood, but because continuing to hold everything inside becomes heavier than sharing it. This is often where preparation begins internally. A person may rehearse conversations in their mind, trying to find the right way to express something that does not feel simple. They may imagine different responses, different outcomes, different possibilities, not because they can control what will happen, but because uncertainty naturally leads the mind to explore scenarios. Alongside that preparation is vulnerability, the recognition that once something is said, it cannot be taken back. That truth changes emotional pacing. It slows things down internally. It makes every thought feel more deliberate. Because now, words are no longer just thoughts, they are potential turning points. In this space, emotions are no longer hidden in the background. They become central. They influence decisions, reactions, and expectations. And even though fear may still exist, it is no longer the only force present. There is also honesty trying to emerge. There is also the need for emotional resolution. What stands out most in situations like this is that nothing is truly static. Emotions evolve, understanding deepens, perspectives shift. What felt unclear at one stage begins to take shape over time, even if slowly. People do not remain in the same emotional state forever, especially when something meaningful is involved. And so, the process moves forward, not in a straight line, but in waves. Moments of clarity followed by hesitation, moments of emotional openness followed by reflection. It is rarely simple and rarely predictable, but it is human. Ultimately, what this kind of emotional experience points to is not just fear of truth, but also readiness for it, because truth, even when difficult, has a way of bringing structure to emotional confusion. It replaces uncertainty with definition. It allows people to understand where they stand, even if the answer is not what they expected. And when that moment of honesty finally arrives, it does not only change what is known, it changes how everything that came before it is understood.